Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. And this video I'm going to talk to you about the full moon in Gemini. This is going to be my post-reflections video because I haven't had the opportunity to get this video out in time. But I did have another video that I released a couple of days ago called Sun Square Saturn, Maps of Meaning. And I highly encourage you to go watch that one as well, because I'm going to kind of piggyback off that video into this full moon reflections, okay? So I'm just going to jump straight into it for us. One of the most important positions to take or to look at when understanding this full moon itself is the relationship between Mercury and Neptune. So there's an ongoing square between Mercury and Neptune. And there is also the square between Jupiter and Pluto, okay? Now, the Sun and Mars in Sagittarius has a direct correlation to the Jupiter in Taurus, and the full moon in Gemini has a direct correlation to the Mercury aspect, okay? And I'll put the chart on the screen for us now so that you can see that. And so these two aspects, right, the Jupiter squaring Pluto and the Mercury squaring Neptune, tells us a lot about this opposition between the Sun and the Moon. Now, in the previous video, the Sun square Saturn, which again I recommend that you need to go watch if you haven't watched it. Some of this might land differently, so maybe even go watch that and then come back to this one. I talked about how our worldview and the way that we contextualize reality is deeply influenced by environmental factors. Like when you're growing up, there's a lot of experiences and circumstances and situations, there's context around your life that shapes your experience. And oftentimes, if you dig deep enough, you'll actually find that there are a few core patterns that stay in your field of vision that originate from these early life memories. This energy right now, like a part of this energy right now, is about the ability to connect to and see how these prior experiences or belief systems that we hold, okay, shape the way that you find meaning in the world, A. B, shape the way that you give meaning to things in the world, and C, the way that you actually come into the world and will like notice yourself associating or valuing or prioritizing certain maps of reality, because deep down inside there are experiences, positive and negative, that have shaped the underlying perspective that you hold as a map of meaning in your life, okay? So an example of what I mean by this is, for me, right, growing up where I was growing up, it was often very difficult to create connection with an environment that I was in. It was difficult for me to create a connection in a way that I could articulate myself, my perceptions, my feelings, my thoughts. What this led to was me naturally becoming interested in transcendental ideals and ideas like astrology. And a big part of why astrology really sort of worked for me and with me was because it helped me connect with the way that I map reality, which is this deep inquiry into more metaphysical concepts as well as deeply held understanding of how we are more than just this immediate environment. And so as I was kind of growing up, I was noticing, as I'm reflecting back, right? As I'm reflecting back as an adult, reflecting back on my childhood, I was noticing how my natural orientation or instinct to make sense of things always came from deeper inquiry into aspects of reality that were not here, like in the immediacy, right? It was very much about kind of like the stars, about the cosmos. I always orientated my interest in things in a more mystical way. That also being said, a tremendous amount of the sort of unfortunate emotional neglect that I had as a child led to also states of disassociation and withdrawal into my own internal world. And so kind of the connection between a natural regression into my internal world as a way to kind of keep safe also allowed me to, or it didn't allow me to, it created a pattern of really trying to, or really struggling to articulate feelings and sensations and perspectives to the external world because they were very subjective or they were very sensory based. And oftentimes that would lead me to feel that loss of connection. And so astrology came into my life as a way of bridging that gap, right? It allowed me to utilize an external language structure that could be generally understood and universally understood between two people. And so I would use astrology as a way to articulate a deeper perception that was present and aware within inside of myself. So throughout my journey in life, I've always used astrology as a way to translate experiences. So you can almost think of it in the sense that what I'm doing today and how I'm communicating to you is a continuation of this deeply held and structured and formed map of meaning that I use to navigate reality, and it is what you're experiencing right now. So part of my kind of process with this full moon energy and the energy that has been coming before with the Mars-Uranus opposition, and I'd even go as far as to say what was already taking place for me in like June, July, was recognizing this necessity for coming out of that space so that there would be balance between just what's immediately here and what is also in the skies, as it were. And almost in a sense to kind of create an embodiment process of not leaving the body and going into that Aquarian realm and staying in that space of abstractness and non-linearity and creativity and imaginative, but to come into more sort of an earthly realm of, you know, if you have 5 bricks and you need to build something and you only have 5 bricks, you can't do more than that, right? It's like there's limitations in the kind of material plane. And being able to synthesize my consciousness between these two states, right? To allow there to be a synthesis between the two. And giving more value, more priority to the equilibrium versus just feeding the part of me that feels deeply safe, comfortable, secure, developed in this more esoteric persona that I have. Okay, so that is me explaining to you what I see in the astrology chart for all of us, right? As human beings, we develop these persona structures that we use to interact and relate with the world. This is the South Node in Libra and Venus transiting Libra energy. And we form a way of interacting and bridging our internal space to the external space with maps of meaning. And again, these maps of meaning then order and direct and validate and say this is what reality is and this is what not reality is, etc. And oftentimes, and this is particularly what happened when the South Node and North Node were transiting through Gemini Sagittarius in 2020 and 2021, was that we experienced a collective process of everybody's maps of meaning interacting and clashing. And what you really got to see, if you looked deep enough, is how we respond, react, and feel when the edges of our maps of meaning sort of overlap onto other people's maps of meaning. And then when we bring out the Sagittarius archetype, which of course you'll naturally see in all of the textbooks, which is, you know, Sagittarius is very fanatical, it holds these wildly belief systems, and, you know, it will fight with that, and it's always right in that sense. And that's actually not, to me, it's not actually a Sagittarius quality at all. Mainly because I take the position that the qualities that we've assigned with the planets or the signs themselves are reflections of our own personality structures embedded in the archetype itself, as opposed to the archetypes having these personality structures, which that's for another video, and I'd love to get into that for you. But in terms of what I'm talking about here is that it's actually when the human ego connects with other patterns of perceptions of maps of meaning that challenge or threaten its feelings of security or stability or safety. And then what will happen out of that as an adaptation is it will emerge a need to either control the narrative or to say it's right or wrong. So what I've actually done here now is I've laid out in this process the entirety of this astrological chart, and I want to break it down for you. Okay, so the Neptune square Mercury has two functions. One, Neptune in Pisces, Mercury in Sag, says there's an ongoing evolutionary intention to break out of pre-existing mental structures or patterns of thinking that no longer reflect the current state of the world as it is today in the definitions that we have here today. Okay, so what was true and made sense in, say, 1980, for instance, may have absolutely no relevancy in the world that we live in today. So if I said to you, hey, I'm going to fax over to you something and I need you to sign it and then fax it over back to me, the majority of us would turn around and say, why don't you just use like an online program that allows you to create a signature and then you just email it to me? Like, it's so much faster. Why would you be weird? That would be a reflection of Mercury-Neptune square, where Mercury reflects the way that we label and define things relative to the context of time, right? Again, labeling something in the 1920s and labeling something now today, there's going to be conflicts there. So Mercury reflects where we label things and then we use these labels as a way to connect and communicate. Yeah, and the Neptune piece says, pay attention to what has become outdated or has lost the meaning. And so what you have between this natural square between Mercury and Neptune in the chart is a progressive fading away or an erosion of definitions and communication patterns that no longer hold true in the current context of the world right now. So that's the evolutionary intention with those planets, right? So you progressively watch how your ideas and perspectives and opinions and communication that you may have about your own sense of map of meaning of the world, but also the maps of the meaning that we as a society and world have given the meaning of life. Like, what is the meaning of life, right? And how we answer these questions. Like, that energy is existing on the collective, and we're having this conversation in many ways, but we're also having it internally where we're asking ourselves, is this the set of maps that I would like to use to navigate myself moving forward? And then the Jupiter in Taurus piece squaring the Pluto is asking the question, well, if you're looking at these underlying belief systems and noticing that the way that you communicate or define your reality or the way you build your map of meanings does not feel in alignment with you're currently at, then allow for those patterns or belief systems to be examined, exposed, and to be transmuted. To be asked yourself, is this relevant for me anymore? And to really inquire into how these belief systems or ideas have shaped you, and if they are continuing to shape you, how much purpose or value do they bring you, as an example. Okay, so that would be another kind of question that I'd propose to myself looking at these transits. So as a collective, we're moving through the ways that we've built maps of meaning as a way to understand ourselves as a human species, and then how they've collapsed, and then how we've emerged into new ideas of how things work, and then the progressive collapsing of these ideas and the emergence of a new way of needing to think and survive in a world that feels incredibly unstable and unpredictable and very much at a state of flux, right? When you look out to the world, for instance, and you see the different experiences that are occurring, it's often very difficult to notice or associate states of change in positive ways unless you actively go and actually see the states of positive changes that are taking place in areas that don't have as much exposure due to sort of mainstream media. So there are lots of things that appear as if they're in a state of flux. It is absolutely true, like change, unpredictable, chaos, uncertainty. And that kind of collective energy is what's present for us individually in terms of what is becoming unstable or what is becoming less grounded And that less groundedness is specifically speaking to the origin of your belief systems and the ways that you would naturally build and shape reality and define reality. Okay? So I'm going to summarize this all for you over here. So don't sort of get caught up in the process of, what is this guy talking about? Because I am speaking pretty fast at this moment in time. I do recognize that. So Mercury-Neptune square, in evolutionary astrology's terms, this aspect between these two will reflect a crisis in consciousness, which means there is an impulse that is emerging between Mercury and Neptune that is saying individuate, right? Break out of, becoming dissatisfied with. So as I said again, right, there's new emergent ideas that are coming into your reality that are reflecting positive, healthy growth for you. And then there are fading perceptions and ideas and perspectives that no longer have the same value that they once had. And we're kind of in this interplay between the progressive ideas becoming faded and not losing the value, and the necessity for aligning with new ways of thinking, believing, and perceiving that offer stronger, deeper states of empowerment for yourself. Okay, but then when you think about it in terms of the collective, as I said, in terms of flux, you'll see that there's a strong ideological challenge that is held within the collective and the collective discourse at the moment, because there is a need to examine the underlying belief systems that have come before and to see if they have legitimacy or relevancy. And that also is something that is, again, as I said, on the kind of framework of what is happening in collective. And that breakdown is specifically related to the Neptune-Mercury square as well as the Jupiter-Pluto square. The Jupiter-Pluto square specifically speaks to an underlying need to expose or underlying belief systems that have been repressed or shamed, or any belief systems that you hold within yourself that put you down, that you sort of regress and you hide away. You want to kind of look at where these belief systems are not actually serving you in healthy ways, right? So that's the Jupiter-Pluto square. And then, as I said, the Mercury-Neptune is a facilitating aspect that helps us decay and let go of and surrender belief systems and thinking, particularly thinking ideas that no longer have legitimacy or relevancy in your life today as they maybe had a long time ago, as an example. So it's kind of freeing and breaking out of, and also examining and exposing where these belief systems, these deeply held belief systems exist. Okay? So the kind of summary that I want to put across here today is this. We build maps of meaning. These maps of meaning help us regulate and make sense of the world. Depending on the nature of the conditioning that you had, maps of meaning will be built and established and integrated within yourself. They will guide you up until a certain point, and then at the certain point you need to examine these underlying beliefs and ask yourself, do they still offer me the same value or the same empowerment or the same protection that they did before? And as you go through this deep self-reflective inquiry and you start to notice and you recognize, is this truth actually still serving me? And you may find this difficult because oftentimes it can be very difficult to ask yourself the question, well, how do I know this belief system's serving me? That's where it's not it's not like fixing the problem. It's much as an invitation into inquire the nature of the beliefs that you hold and if they still are true. That's the invitation I created. And one of the ways that you can do this is you can actually simply just keep asking yourself the same question. How do I know this is true? So again, for me as an example, the belief that I can hold is, well, I feel empowered and I find this way of communicating through astrology and this medium of astrology empowering. And I can say, okay, cool. But are there other aspects of my life where I can't use this tool to communicate because the other person doesn't have that same framework or map, as it were, to allow me to feel as if there's a resonance or synchronicity. And so therefore that opportunity or possibility breaks down and it becomes isolating. That's my Aquarius rising, right? This kind of isolating aspect. So what has occurred for me is, as I've questioned this, I've said, well, I can see the disadvantage in this process. And what I could do is open up new ways of developing language structures around my immediate environment to people that are not astrologically based, as a way to then develop and expand and build new maps of meaning, so that I can kind of navigate the world with more than just one way or medium of communication, right? So again, the idea here is maps of meaning. They help us navigate. They can be shaped by our upbringing. Ask ourselves the question, how many of these experiences still dominate the way in which my map of meaning has been created? And then ask yourself the question, as you examine this, what outdated models of perceptions no longer serve me? It's like your body is the iPhone or the Android, and then this current transit right now is, hey, by the way, there's a new iOS update, or hey, by the way, there's a new Android update. And so we kind of consistently keep checking in with the perceptions of truths and beliefs and ideas that we hold about ourselves. And we ask ourselves, is this really truly supporting me? A lot of the time you'll actually find that when you start to question these internal structures, there's a lot of fear. This is where the Neptune Mercury comes from, because all of a sudden the identity associated with that structural belief system or map reveals to you the origins of why that map actually was formed to begin with. So you can often find, especially when you're examining your own beliefs, that maybe the reason why you hold this belief is because you're still wrestling with something that's unprocessed from an earlier part of your life. And that's again where the Jupiter-Pluto comes in, as well as the Mercury-Neptune, right? This is capacity to really inquire into these underlying beliefs that have occurred. And the final thing I'll say here is that the turbulence videos, right, the Mars-Uranus squares that I was talking about, and how the energy kind of just erupted for us 2 weeks ago, like a large part of this energy is a continuation of examining the nature of those emotions that came to the surface from the unconscious. Okay, so that's something to also kind of bear in mind for those of you that are a little bit more advanced in self-reflective ways, that if you see the connection between 2 weeks ago and the kind of emergent emotions that came up, and to examine the underlying reasons as to what those emotions were about, you'll find true like gold when it comes to these transits. Okay. All right, fantastic. So on the screen right now, I'm going to show you a video of Sun square Saturn, and I'll also show you a video of the turbulence as well. If you go and click on any of those, if you haven't watched them, you'll benefit a lot from this video too. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.